Hi, and welcome to What the Phalange, the podcast where we watch every episode of Friends, discuss it, deconstruct it, and fan over it, one episode at a time.
My name is Quinn, pronouns zizier, or they, them.
And my name is Emilie, pronouns she and her.
This week, we're talking about Season 1, Episode 18, the one with all the poker. Aired March 2nd, 1995, written by Jeff Astroff and Mike Sikowitz, directed by James Burrows.
In this episode, Rachel decides she's sick of being a server and being called "excuse me" and sends out a ton of job applications, landing an interview for one of her dream jobs.
The most prominent plotline of this episode is Monica, Rachel, and Phoebe learning to play poker with the goal of beating the guys in the name of feminism.
As this unfolds, we revisit and explore Ross's feelings towards Rachel. Do-do-do.
Do-do.
Okay.
Hi, Emilie.
Hi, Quinn.
We're back.
We're back.
So
after a week of being away from chaotic wildness of our lives, not getting our lives together is really what happened.
I wouldn't say that. I think it's the opposite, is that you have gotten your life together and are now have real, adult responsibilities. And
that's true.
Those had to be prioritized. And then, of course, obviously, there was a weird freak accident in Montreal, and we didn't have power for a good portion of time. But then instead, we're smelling gas in the air being wafted down.
Yeah, did we ever figure out what happened there?
I don't know. I don't have no idea. It's a little unsettling. But now we're back. I think it kind of worked out in the end because you were really disappointed that you couldn't do this episode.
I know. I was. This is I think in my top 10 favorite episodes of Friends. This episode is just, it's great. It's so well written. And I just love every single episode of Friends in which they're all doing things together. Like the football episode from season 2, the blackout episode where they're all in the room together. Any episode in which the whole team kind of comes together. I love it. It's my favorite. And I feel like they try to do 2 or 3 episodes like that per season.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that they usually are really good because they can all really be their characters. I think one of the great things about this episode is that Ross is really Ross and Rachel is really Rachel and Phoebe is really Phoebe. You know, everyone is who they are fully. And
yeah, the essence of their characters.
Yeah, because sometimes I find that some of the characters sort of blend into each other, especially when there's certain people who are not in the room who would typically make certain jokes. Someone else just sort of says those jokes anyway. But it's really nice when they're all in the same room because then the person who's the original inspiration for these jokes is saying them, you know?
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is that Chandler got to say all the sarcastic jokes.
Yeah, I know. It was great. Yeah, I thought it was great. Chandler has some great lines in this episode.
Yeah, he does for sure. Is there 3 things that you want to talk about this episode?
I do. One of the things that I want to talk about is the disparity of different gender roles taking up spaces in certain specific spaces and how to rectify that. I want to talk about touch a little bit on what's happening out in Nova Scotia right now. I also want to talk about, I want to talk about how many missing scenes there are in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many good scenes in this episode that are missing. To clarify, from the DVD versus the Netflix or the streaming version.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk, so I don't have necessarily 3 things. I want to talk a little bit about mansplaining, and I want to talk a little bit about the Rachel and Ross dynamic from the perspective of basically I want to figure out if I feel good or bad about their banter, because I don't necessarily feel bad about it. I think it's cute. I think they've got a good banter throughout the entire episode, but I also, there's points where it gets a little bit is this okay anymore? You know? The third thing I want to talk about is Ross and Monica and the competition between siblings.
You didn't listen to last week's podcast, eh?
I did not. No. Uh-oh.
Because I answered the question.
Are we competitive?
Yeah.
The answer was yes, right?
Yes. I also mentioned that you are a sore loser.
I am.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to admit that.
I brought up the haunted trivia that we played the other day.
That was such a stupid game, though. Okay. We're not doing this. We are not doing this. Okay, anyways, moving on.
I want to take a hot sec before we begin or continue on. And I want to thank everyone who is our patron. And I want to also give a special thanks to Ray of Neptune, who has been a super pertinent part of our community, like our Insta community, and giving feedback and answering polls, and who is now a patron. So thank you. And I want to thank
you.
I'm so excited. You're officially a friend. And I just want to thank everyone else on our patrons, and also just to remind everyone to support the show if you like it, if you're enjoying it. And you can do that by leaving us a review or becoming a patron yourself.
Yay! Support us!
Support! Also, like I was saying, the last bit of last episode where I had a solo episode, guys, it was very weird. My throat hurt after 38 minutes of talking to myself.
My throat always hurts after these podcasts. I don't know why.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm not used to talking straight for like 40 minutes. But that's actually not true either, because I teach literally 1 hour of yoga classes.
Yeah, no, I know. I don't understand what it is about podcasting specifically.
Or I think it's because like I'm talking loud and I'm like into it. Whereas when I teach yoga, I have my calm. Let's take an inhale. We'll reach the arms up overhead. And then exhale, fold forward over the legs.
Yeah, you have a very distinct yoga voice too.
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, little shout out to myself. You guys should start doing yoga with me. I teach a Friday morning class at 7:15 a.m. It's free. Join.
Yeah. Go. Emily's a great yoga instructor, guys. Go take her class.
You teach a Wednesday night class too. Okay, anyways.
Okay, yeah. But I do. Anywho. Okay, so
cold open.
This is a great cold open.
Yeah, it's in my tops. Again, it's one of those cold opens that involves everyone in it. Just like that same cold open we had where they were singing that other song a few weeks ago. Now they're all singing a song here, and they're all helping Rachel out. It's like a cute little collective family moment.
Yeah, I think it's so cute how much they're all like always doing things for and with each other to support each other's lives. It's very adorable.
So they're all helping her fold up her resumes and put them into envelopes, which, lol, did you ever have to apply for jobs by putting resumes in envelopes and like sending it places?
I definitely had to like hand in resumes by hand.
I know, but like it's so weird. Like she sends out these resumes and then she gets like response back by mail. Not by phone, by mail.
Yeah, this whole setup here,
weird.
I could pick it apart, and it's something that kind of bothers me because she gets a letter back. Like, Rachel gets a letter back being like, you have an interview by mail. And then that day, you can tell by, like, the clothing, because Monica's wearing the same outfit. Rachel technically goes to the interview and then comes back. And they have another poker game. So it's very confusing.
Yeah, so what happens if the mail was delivered late?
It's unreal. It just doesn't make sense. The only way that I was able to work around it in my head was that she got the letter back saying that we would like to have an interview with you. And then she called them and they were like, we have an opening today. Can you come in? That's how I justified it in my head. And it is ridiculous that I have thought about it this much.
But they wouldn't have showed us that scene because that would be a very boring scene.
It would be a very boring
calling
scene.
The interview people. Okay, cool. I want to say a thing. So I love the fact that she says she has excellent computer skills. And then not only does she not use the computer properly to type out the fact that she has excellent computer skills, but she also doesn't know how printing things even works, which means she doesn't have any computer skills. She has terrible computer skills.
Okay, I disagree with that. I think that Rachel says things like that, you know, like do you think it's on all of them? I don't think she literally thinks that.
I think she did.
No, I don't think she does. I mean, like, it just doesn't make sense. You know, I just feel like it's totally something that I would say. Be like, you know, I don't know. I
don't know. It's hard to say. I think she was being serious, but I think like 2 seconds later she would have been like, obviously, like, oh yeah, obviously. You know what I mean? Like, I think she was like in this moment of panic where she's like, it can't be on all of them, you know? But then obviously she's not an idiot, so she gets it. But and then they reverse the whistling as they take the resumes out of the envelopes.
But I think that might only be in the DVD version.
Oh, interesting.
Also, I want to point out that on our polls for this episode, we asked, have you ever found a typo on an application or resume at the very last second? And 89% said yes, because 89% of the world is like, that is what the average human, yes, that makes sense. But then there's 11% that are like, no. And I swear to God, I think it was just you and Kayla.
Well, like, I don't understand. Do you not proofread a resume before you print it out?
Yes.
Like,
but your proofreading isn't perfect every time. I think
like, I've probably printed out a resume, like, not with the intention of going out, but like with the intention of proofreading it. Like, printed a resume.
Right, no, but it's more at the very last second, kind of in like what Rachel did. Okay, so
moving on.
The next scene is interesting because they make use of the set really well, where they have like Joey and Ross in the background, and you have like then Monica and Phoebe come in and they have what's going on in the foreground. And I thought that was really interesting. It was almost very I find it's very like play-like. I don't feel like they do it very often like this, you know?
But it makes sense because they're filmed in front of a live studio audience, so it kind of is like a play.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. In this scene, we rediscover that Ross is in love with Rachel. Surprise, surprise.
Ba, ba, ba.
And he's the biggest freaking dork in the world.
But I relate to this. I relate to this a lot. Like that feeling of like just having a totally unreal crush and you're just like non-functioning over your crushness. Like you're just like, I don't know how to be a human around you. And the thing is like, he normally does know how to be a human around her when he's in this context where he's like thinking of her as a friend. But then he has these moments where he's like, what if I could be more? And then he kind of like panics and tries to be like flirty and cute. And then like obviously doesn't know how to do that.
Do you think he was being flirty and cute?
No, I think he was being dopey and like, I can't handle this.
I think he just didn't know how to operate and shut down. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
But right before that, I think it's really funny how when Monica and Phoebe come in, how they're like going through the mail and Rachel is there and she's like pretending to like be a good at her job, which is hilarious because it's like at no other point has she ever even tried to pretend like she is good at her job.
I know, right? She's just like, yeah, she literally will often like sit down on the couch during her work hours. But here in this one moment, I wonder if maybe she's like trying to make a good first impression so she can use them as a reference for her next job, you know?
I mean, also she is looking for another job, which is particularly bad when you're doing that at your current job.
Oh, that's true. That's true. That's extra bad. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So I want to point out something. Gunther is in this episode.
Oh, in the background.
And I think this is the first time that I've noticed him, and it might be his first episode on stage, like in the series. So for anyone who has not seen Friends, Gunther is going to be developed into a character on the show. And what I was actually just reading the other day when I was making the trivia episode is that the guy, I forget his name, the guy who plays Gunther, his friend is a hairstylist and needed to practice bleaching hair. And so it was like the day before he got called in to play an extra on set. And he like got his friend to bleach his hair. He didn't really care. He didn't think it mattered. He was just going to be in the background. But it sort of seems like it's like alluded to the fact that like basically people liked this look on him so much that they kind of like developed him into a character based on like this very particular look that he had, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, and then it becomes like his hair. That's who he is. It's his trademark.
Yeah, and he said that he had to bleach his hair once a week for 10 years.
Oof. That's rough.
Yeah, brutal.
Hope his hair is okay now. Or his scalp. I hope his scalp is okay.
Yeah.
Rachel's wearing a great outfit in this episode. It's like,
I know.
It's a key outfit. Like, there's a reason why Roscoe's kind of gushy when she's there, because she just looks so cute. She was like I would feel that way if I saw Rachel.
What's interesting, though, is that this outfit, I don't know if it was just maybe the shots that I got of it for, like, the polls and, like, the outfit extravaganza on our Instagram, but it didn't actually get rated all that high.
Oh, weird.
It was, like, maybe 4th out of 7.
Did I rate it high? I don't know.
I don't remember. I don't have no way of knowing that now.
Okay, whatever. Okay, so then the scene continues, because this first scene, I've been noticing that in Friends, like, I've noticed that the first scene after the cold open is slightly longer, and they're all kind of there together usually, and it sets the scene for the rest of the episode, and they kind of go off and do their own things for the rest of the episode. But there's always this kind of like reconvening in either Monica's apartment or Central Perk, where they're like, they're kind of discussing what's going to happen in the episode. Like, they're giving a preview of like what we're going to go into. And so then Joey shows up, and Ross and Chandler are laughing at him because he cried last night. And I have like mixed feelings about this. Like, I personally don't actually think it's that bad that they're laughing at him because of this. Like, I feel like they're not necessarily laughing at the fact that he cried, like, you know, like, he's a boy and boys shouldn't cry. Like, I don't get that vibe as much. I think they're just laughing at the fact that, like, he cried over a poker game, you know, like, come on, you know? So, like, I think that is more what they're laughing at. But knowing them, they would laugh at Joey if he cried about anything. In fact, we see it later on in the show that they laugh at him. Yeah,
you would laugh at me if I cried for this reason. I would also laugh at you if you cried for this reason.
Yeah, I have cried because I've lost at games before. Because I'm a very, very, very sore loser. Super sore loser. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you're so open about it, because I shared that last week without you, and I was like, I don't know if Emily will like this.
Oh,
well.
I always think of how, like, within the first month of dating Ilyas, like officially dating Ilyas, we played Monopoly. I got mono. And like,
was it because you played Monopoly?
And I was so drunk once that I threw up on him. So in the first month, Ilyas had to see these like terrible things about me. Well, me getting mono is not really my fault, but like I was like swollen and puffy. I was throwing up all over the place when I was drunk. And then I also got to show my super competitive Monopoly side, which...
Okay, besides the Monopoly, just think of all the pool you guys were playing. Your relationship was based off of you being a competitive ass.
Ass? Wow.
It just felt right to say it.
Tell me how you really feel, Quinn. I'm kidding.
I love you.
No, I'm very competitive. I hate losing. I hate losing. And I think that it's like 100% based on insecurities. Like I think that my whole...
Like Monica?
Yeah. My whole life will fall apart if I make a mistake. It's called anxiety. Look it up, guys.
Nice.
Anyways.
Okay, so they're laughing at Joey and like... Not the nicest, but I think they all have the relationship where they can be this way. That's not the particularly sexist issue at hand here. It happens right after.
Yeah. So they're like, okay, the girls are like, what is this? Phoebe has this great line where she's like trying to get her words together. And I feel this so bad. When you're like trying to tell someone that you don't like, when you're trying to tell someone something political, but you don't have the words for it, and so you're just like kind of fumbling, and then you make yourself sound like an idiot, and then you're like, wow, I shouldn't have said anything at all. But like, it's like, is this some sort of sexist guy thing? Some sort of, you know, and you're just like, oh, Phoebe, I feel you.
Yeah, it's so true. Mm-hmm. I love how with Phoebe, it gives them the license to write lines that are not perfectly constructed. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like usually in a show, like people are like saying the right things, you know, and is fluid. Like you know, the amount of ums that I have to edit out of this podcast is obnoxious. And so it's just like not real life, you know? And I love it with Phoebe. I think it's something that comes up over and over again where she just stutters and is not perfect in the way that she talks and tries to get herself across. And I think it's very real. I love it.
So then Joey says the line, he says, "We just don't happen to know any women who know how to play poker." And this is just the line that like is used to excuse any form of like lack of diversity. It's like this you know, I don't know any women engineers. I don't know any Black actors. I don't know any like, you know, it's like, okay, well then fucking find them because they exist. Like and it's not like, this is not to say that like they need to go out and like diversify their poker night, you know, whatever. But like, like it's just like such a cop-out line to say something like that when it comes to like, when someone addresses the fact that you don't have, you know, diversity, or you don't have, in this case, like women in your group, and then they're called out, and rather than being like, oh yeah, you're right, we don't have women in our group, I wonder why, like maybe we should do something about that, they're like, we don't know any women who play poker, you know? It's like, ugh, shut up.
And I totally understand how this can be like something that seems like is a misconception that can feel very valid to people. They're just like, but like, what am I supposed to do about it? You know, like kind of like what you said, like, I'm not going to go look for people to play poker, you know, like I'm not going to specifically look for, you know, like they're just playing with the friends that they have. And I find that, like this is an issue that exists in society. We live in a society with very specific gender norms that have existed for eons. I was going to say decades, but it's like millennia. Or centuries at the very least. And it's like, it has all led to society looking exactly the way that it is today. And so, like, yes, definitely there are tons of women, like female poker players, but also it's probably less likely that men will find women who play poker because the spaces that men create in the way that they play poker, in like the same way that like gym spaces are predominantly like male dominated spaces. And it has a lot to do with the fact that like women have been pushed out of these spaces, and it makes it a lot harder for people to even like to casually access them if they want to access them. And then when you add on top of that, like that we've been, you know, like probably all of their dads were like, hey, come to our male poker night at some point in their lives, you know, of like, you know, like let's smoke our cigars and do the poker thing, you know, like they were basically socialized to do this at some point. And like knowing like Ross's dad, like that definitely happened, possibly Joey's dad from what we've seen of him, you know, like it's just,
I don't know.
It's like,
yeah, sorry, I was going to say, I don't know about Joey's dad because he's got 6 daughters, so maybe less so, but maybe it's like, what, you know, he takes the one boy he has under his wing, you know, that's totally a real thing too. But yeah, for sure.
And so it's just sort of like, for them to be like, it just so happens that we don't know any women who play poker is like, well, that's not, in some ways, yeah, that can be true because, yeah, you don't know any, but you've also possibly not asked or looked. Like, it's clear that you never asked these 3 women in your life whether or not they play poker because it was something that they just discovered there. So it's not like they're trying very hard. But then on top of that, the way that they're like, they refuse to teach them, that's like the kicker there, you know?
I agree. It is a little bit of that obnoxious. Anyways, yeah, I had something to say, but I forget it now. So we can just move on if you want.
I guess all to say is that like there are male dominant spaces in the world, and we need specific spaces and programs that help bring non-cis men into these spaces. And that's why we have like women in programming and, you know, like women's, you know, gym nights and all these, you know, these things that exist. And at the same time, we have men who complain about them because they're like, well, why are we getting kicked out of our spaces? And why is it easier for women to get into this program now? It's harder for me. And it's a problem.
It is a problem. Yeah, I also agree, like, in the sense that what you were saying about, like, having parents who teach you this, like, I find you see it a lot where people will say things like, oh, well, like, women aren't socialized this way. Women are just this way. Like, women, you know, like, women don't like poker. Women don't like sports. And then it's perpetuated through media, this idea that, like, you always see, and in Friends all the time. Like, there's just so much, like, if it's not blatant sexism, it's just this, like, underlying sexist idea that, like, men do man things and women do women things. And it's a super big trope in, like, all sitcoms and all, like, Hollywood shows, or Hollywood movies as well. But I find that on the flip side, you'll have people who are saying things like, well, men are just like this. And then you'll see them around their kids or around other kids, and, like, they're literally, like, not giving their girls, like, trucks to play with because it's for boys. It's like, where do you think they learn that, you know? And there's this total disconnect with understanding that, like, no, your boy doesn't like pink because you literally never gave him something pink growing up. You know, like, your girl doesn't like trucks because no girl around her was ever playing with trucks. You know, it's like, it becomes this idea where everyone thinks that this is, like, people are completely disconnected with the role in which we play to create these gender roles and these gender stereotypes, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And then not to mention, like, what makes it even worse is that, like, when little boys start to like pink or want to play with Barbies or even, you know, sweep the house because they like to clean it, very often it's like, you know, you have the parents that have a really hard time dealing with that. It's like, but these are, you know, not man things to do. And
way, way, way more do you get people being upset that that men do quote unquote feminine or domestic kind of tasks than you see people being upset when women do male roles. Like, I think I was reading a stat once. We're totally getting off track here, but I think I was reading a stat once where it was saying that something like 80% of full-time working women, if they're in a relationship, still take on something like 90% of domestic tasks. So, like, you have women who are working full-time and then still doing cooking, cleaning, chores, taking care of the kids, dealing with, like, homework, so women are expected to do literally everything, but then meanwhile they're getting paid less. They're getting, like, they're not being taken as seriously because they're always thought like, oh, well, you're going to go off and leave your job and go have another kid or, you know, blah, blah, blah. And anyways, we're totally off track, but whatever, vote.
Hashtag vote.
Hashtag vote. But also voting only does so much. Also change the systems that you have in your own life.
Yeah. I think it's really cute at the end of this scene, though, when they're like, okay, well, teach us. And the men are like, no. And then cut. Yeah. They're teaching them how to play poker.
It's true. But yeah, okay.
Because they're big jerks, but then, you know, they have some pretty awesome women that kick their ass, you know?
Okay, so let's get into that second scene. We're in Monica's apartment, and the men are mansplaining. And I really want to say mansplaining because it's not that they're just explaining to them how to play poker. They, like, if you see Chandler's intonation and you see the way they're talking, it's not just that they're, like, annoyed with them, because, like, honestly, I would be annoyed with them the way that they were, like, acting, which, like, this whole scene upsets me. And this is my favorite episode, and this is, like, one of my favorite scenes too, but it just upsets me in the way that it's done. Like, the men are being so condescending to explaining to the women, like, how to play poker. But then on the flip side, the women are just being portrayed as being, like, really stupid. And the women are just not stupid. And I find the way that, like, Rachel's like, oh, well, I have the, you know, 6 of spades or whatever it is. Like, you can have mine. Or 10 of spades or whatever. And Phoebe's like, oh, thanks. And Rachel's like, it's okay. I don't need it. Like, have you never played any single game before? Like that's not how that works. And I find that they really like dumb down the girls in this scenario to like justify the guys being mansplaining.
It's frustrating because like it's also interesting because the way that we're approaching this podcast is that we're like deconstructing it as though these are real humans that have not been written by other people. But we do have to take a step back, fairly probably more than we do, and sort of look at how the writers are actually writing these characters. And that's something that definitely I thought about a lot while watching this episode. Mm-hmm. And I think you really see it. Like they're just writing Rachel as like a complete and total ditz, and Phoebe as a flake, and Monica like a little bit less, but she's like compensating because she's like she's more masculine than the other ones, you know?
Yeah.
But then that in itself is like then made to be too much. Mm-hmm. And she's like too aggressive and
too competitive. Yeah, for sure. But on a better note, I actually really like the way Phoebe is written in this episode in a lot of ways. Like we've gotten tastes of like Phoebe's quirkiness, but in this episode you get like full blast Phoebe quirkiness, you know? Yeah, and like just like that scene, I think it's later, but I'm gonna bring it up now. She says like, oh my God, poker is like Joker, or Joker is like poker with a J. And then Chandler just sarcastically says back, Joe incidence is like coincidence with a J. Like it's just like, she's just being so quirky and silly, and the whole episode. And I really like that we get to see the real Phoebe, the real quirky Phoebe.
Yeah. So, okay. I have a question for you.
Okay.
And we don't have to answer it now as we go through the rest of the episode, because this is when the gloves start coming off, right? At this point here. Mm-hmm. I want us at the end of this episode to share who we thought was the biggest jerk in the episode. Because this is like in around this scene, we polled everyone. We're like, do you think Ross was being a big jerk?
I wrote no. Everyone wrote yes. I said no.
Yeah. What was the polls here? Yeah. Do you think Ross was being a big jerk? 83% said yes, and 17% said no.
So I said no specifically because if he was like with a bunch of strangers and he was acting this way, then yeah, for sure he's a big jerk. But like, I feel as though they're playing a game, they're being competitive, they're being bantery, they're being like kind of silly with each other. They were making fun of Joey, who like cried because he had, like I just feel as though like when you're playing a game, you get competitive, you get silly, like and maybe like I'm just like that. Like I'm really competitive, as we've already discussed. But like when I play games, I really like to like not make fun of, but kind of like poke the bear. You kind of just like, you kind of aggravate the person. You're like, oh, you're totally not going to win. I'm going to kick your ass, and it's this like silly.
Isn't it like, is it called like talking smack or something like that?
Totally. That's exactly what it is. Like you're like talking smack and you're like, I'm going to kick your ass. And I understand that like it's weird because Ross is kind of the only one doing it, but he's also not, because Monica then comes through and she's like, are we gonna play some poker? Like, come on, let's do it. Like, let's play. And she's like being all like intense. And then, Chandler's making fun of Joey, and like Joey's being kind of talking smack, being like, we don't have to play if you don't want to, like everyone's kind of in it. And so I don't really understand why like people think that Ross is being he's the worst. I don't know.
Why is he getting targeted out? Like maybe he's the one that sort of starts it. Mm-hmm. And I do think that maybe kind of what makes him a bit more of a jerk is that he is sort of targeting Rachel a little bit because he's trying to be super macho,
Mm-hmm.
like trying to like clear that he likes her and is like, trying to like, I don't know, do the peacock walk or whatever, show his feathers.
But I feel like that doesn't work. Like I feel as though...
Does Ross do anything that works ever?
No, but I think I I feel like they have better energy later on in the episode when they're kind of like going back and forth, like they're fighting, talking smack to each other back and forth. That to me is a little bit more like flirty, but like aggressive flirty, but also not flirty. It's kind of like this weird, like they're creating a rapport between the two of them. Okay, but on a note, in this scene, we get an excellent moment in which Rachel says, wow, you really are enjoying this, aren't you? You get your yayas from taking money from your friends. And then Chandler says, yes, and I get my yayas from IKEA. I think he says something along the lines of, you have to assemble them yourselves, but they're cheaper, or something like that.
Yeah, Chandler has, there's some really good lines in this episode.
And this is with this was written by Jeff Astroff and Mike Sikowitz, and I feel like in the past we've had episodes in which they've written it and we've felt the same way. So
yeah, I agree. I've kind of noticed this pattern as well. I kind of want to actually start keeping note
of it, because I'm curious too. Like scrolling down, I'm just kind of looking at other episodes. I have a feeling they did the one with the blackout.
I think so.
Maybe I'm wrong, but anyways, there's just like a couple of great episodes with that's them, written by them. Mm-hmm.
To sum up this scene, essentially they all sit down, they play poker, the guys are being condescending, the women are being ditzes, or just like being super kind to each other. And then at the end, when they have to settle, I guess I wanted to point out like the reference that Chandler makes where he says, he's like, where basically everyone's saying that they have to settle, and Rachel is like, what do you mean settle? And Chandler has another good line where he's like, what does he say, Emily?
He says, settle the Jamestown colony of Virginia.
Yeah, the king is giving us something
great.
or other.
Oh my God, is this where you're going to make your link? Are you going to talk
is.
about colonialism? Great. Good.
Yeah.
That's a great link.
So just to let you know that the Jamestown settlement was the first English settlement in this place that we typically call North America, is also known as Turtle Island. And I just want to put a nice little reminder out there, guys, that Columbus did not discover anything. And in fact, there were many, many, many people already living here for a very long time. And then bringing up colonization, I just want to segue over to essentially what's happening in Nova Scotia. If you don't know what's happening in Nova Scotia, I recommend taking a look and looking into it. And I actually have a recommendation for a really great podcast that you can listen to that touches in on it and does a much better job at kind of explaining the implications of it, of what's going on. The podcast is Sandy and Nora Talk Politics. And so if you don't know...
Sandy and Nora.
I know, they're great. So they're a great podcast. And in general, I just recommend listening to them. They're a podcast once a week, and they talk about kind of like what's happening in the world in politics, and kind of they're specifically talk about the left politics and the issues that are in it. And they do a really good job of sort of breaking it down. But they have episode 124 or 124, and it's called White Rage in Nova Scotia, Terrorism or Genocide, ? And, spoiler, it's a genocide. But I definitely recommend taking a listen. And if you really don't have the whole hour to listen to the podcast, they really start delving into what's happening in Nova Scotia about halfway through. So at the 25-minute mark. So go head on over and take a listen to them. Also, they're awesome. If you they're just conversational and really knowledgeable and awesome, and I really just want to be friends with them is really what it is.
Yeah, totally. They have a great episode also about abolishing the police, and they really break down Sandy Hudson, I think her name is. She's been on a bunch of interviews with CBC, especially during the basically at the height of the George Floyd protests. She was on CBC talking about how Canada needs to also defund our police. And yeah, they have a great episode about abolishing the police as well.
I believe she also started Black Lives Matter Toronto, or was one of the founding members.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Good to know. I didn't know that. All right, so moving on. Listen to that podcast.
So Ross is, I'm not a nice guy, and possibly a big jerk. But we're gonna debate this as time goes on.
Okay, so we get to the next scene where we're in Ross's apartment. They're just eating pizza and chilling. They never chill at Ross's apartment.
This is the second time we see Ross's apartment.
And so then we get one of the best scenes ever in the history of Friends, and it's not on the Netflix version. So
this is a scene that's worth getting the DVDs to see.
Actually, our local library has the DVDs. So I'm sure your local library also has the DVDs. So go support your local library.
Yeah, as we all saw from last week's episode and from our Instagram Friends quiz this week, Friends make $1 billion per year on syndication revenue. We don't need to give them any more. You can go ahead and head over to your local library.
Yes, and borrow from them. Anyway, so if you are going to get the DVD, it is season 1, disc 3. Just letting you know. But it is, so the DVD episode of this, basically they're in Ross's apartment, and they're having that conversation, and Marcel puts on the music, The Lion Sleeps Tonight. And in the Netflix version, exactly, we all know it.
The lion sleeps tonight.
In this,
Ooh. Sorry.
Okay, are you done?
Yeah, okay, I'm done.
In the Netflix version, it stops. We all hear the music, and then everyone kind of laughs, like, haha, he's playing like The Jungle Sleeps Tonight, blah, blah, blah. He's a monkey, get it? And so everyone laughs. But in the DVD version, the scene continues, and the boys are all in the kitchen. We're in like Ross's like open living room, dining room concept, because apparently every apartment in New York City has open living room, dining room concepts. Clearly they don't.
Every apartment in New York City that is actually a set in LA.
Yeah. Also totally looking for an apartment right now that has an open living room, dining room concept.
In what area, Emily? New York?
Verdun. Anyways, and so then they're just kind of like there eating pizza, and then they start kind of nodding their heads and they're dancing, and then all of a sudden they start going into this like one line where it goes Ross, Chandler, Joey, and they're in this line and they're dancing. They're each doing their own signature dances, and they're like dancing around the kitchen in a line. It is so good. So good. And you see this
so
like
good.
Pure moment. It's just so pure.
Yeah, and you know that the audience didn't know it was coming too, because they just freak out when they start dancing.
They laugh uproariously. It's great.
And you can actually see a little snippet of it, because the opening credits, in the Netflix version, it keeps that little scene. So you have like this little like pocket of a scene of them like all in a line sort of like dancing, but you don't
get the
they
full
don't ever
scene.
Actually show the anyway, I don't understand how they cut that out.
Yeah, it's so great. It's one of the best scenes in all of Friends, I would argue.
It's intense, but arguably yes.
After that, the scene ends. We're back in Monica's apartment, and they're talking about the competitiveness of Ross and Monica, and people are saying Monica is just as competitive as Ross, and I would argue that Monica is more competitive than Ross, but we'll see that later on in the show, and you don't really see it right away so far in these first few episodes. And I find that you can really tell that they're siblings. Like the writers do a good job of showing that they clearly grew up in the same house. They have this like competitive nature, and their competitive nature comes out in different ways. Like Ross's competitive nature comes out in this kind of like whiny, needy, kind of rude, mansplaining dude way. And then Monica's competitiveness comes out with a little bit of like insecurity, but also like she's the boss and control freak style competitiveness. That's my analysis. You can add to it if you want.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going somewhere with it.
No, I just wanted to talk because I find it interesting. Like you see how competition can look different ways depending on like other things that are going on with you. Like I'm such a Monica.
Yeah,
I need to control things, you know? So Rachel gets a job, or she gets an interview.
Yeah, so Rachel, okay, this is where it happens, where Rachel gets this piece of mail, and apparently then has the interview in the same day. But she gets a piece of mail, and I think it's so cute, where she's like, it's at Saks Fifth Avenue. And then Phoebe is like, it's like the mothership is calling you home.
I know, it's great. Great line from
It's so
Phoebe.
cute. Also, just to let you know, Monica's outfit right now, where she has that red kind of croppy sweater that's all loose and her super high washed out Levi's jeans, that is the one that won this episode.
Oh, wow. I voted that lower.
Oh, really? Because I was totally like, yeah, it's a nice episode. Like, it's a nice outfit, but it's just like a sweater and a pair of pants, you know?
I don't like the color red that much. I like, it's a pretty bright red. I rarely vote for things that are red.
So then we have Aunt Iris that shows up.
Iris shows up.
And I really love this, how they basically get a woman to teach them how to play poker.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah.
Because she won't be as mansplaining.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's tough, but she's not a mansplainer. You know?
It's different. And that's where I think people get confused. Like, people are like, oh, is every time a man explains something, it's mansplaining? No, it's like when a man is being condescending to a woman, and you can tell that there's this like underlying subconscious belief that this woman knows less than you.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily conscious. It's not like that man is like, I am above you, woman. Like, he just like doesn't realize that this is something that's been ingrained in him. And there's times where it's way more obvious and men are doing it to be shitty. And there's times that men are doing it just because they literally grew up believing that what they say is more valuable. And I think this goes a little bit more, I'll say, with white men in particular, because I think that there's like this we've just created a white man's world, like, and you know, a white supremacist patriarchy. And so we value white men's voices and opinions way more than anyone else. And you'll often see kind of like this like white-splaining happen with white men as well. So white men will talk down to people of color regardless of gender. And so I don't know if like And it obviously depends, because it also depends on like what the conversation and the topic is about. But in this case, like, I think it's like the men were definitely mansplaining, not just because they're men and so anything they say is mansplaining, but because they were being condescending. And there's like this underlying feeling that the women in their life don't know anything about this, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, like, if you just flash back and hold up these two scenes next to each other, you know, where the guys are explaining things, like, they're basically like being like, now you shuffle the cards, you know, and they're like talking to the women as though they assume that they know nothing and possibly can't even grasp the concept, even if they were to explain it properly. And whereas like Aunt Iris comes in and she's like, okay, guys, get on the same page. You know, like,
she's not fucking around.
Yeah, and she's harsh and mean, but she also has full belief that these women will get there and will understand.
That's the big difference.
They just need to be explained and have maybe like, and you know, she has a bit of a tough love approach, but she has no, like, she doesn't walk into that assuming that they know absolutely nothing and will never be able to grasp it, you know?
Totally.
Okay, so
we get to the next scene.
Yeah, so then they swap over. So after, okay, wait, first of all, Aunt Iris is wearing my favorite outfit of the episode, where she's wearing these baller suspenders.
Yeah, I like that outfit too, yeah.
And so this is where things get, like, time-wise, like, confusing with mail. And so then it swaps over and we're at Ross's apartment again.
Wait, before that happens, I just want to state, because I don't think it should go unsaid, there's kind of a transphobic joke on the DVD version.
Right, yes.
If you watch the DVD version, I just want to recognize that that is a transphobic joke in which Aunt Iris basically says something along the lines of how is it her son or her nephew or something, Nathan, thinks that he's a man stuck in a woman's body. And then Rachel says, don't you mean he thinks he's a woman stuck in a man's body? And clearly they're using all these wrong pronouns. They don't understand what's going on. And then Aunt Iris says, it should be so easy. So it's like, it's this kind of like recognizing
It's
trans people
weird.
exist, but like not actually knowing what transness is at all in any form or way.
Yeah, put into the context of this show and like the greater optics of the show that clearly just like mangles the concept and like just depreciates trans people in general, and then like put within that lens, and then on top of that it's sort of like put as a passing joke and is not, I don't know, it's it's a hard one to read, but I think in general it's good that they left it out of the streaming version.
I agree. Okay, so then we're back in Ross's apartment, like you said. Rachel has just gone to her interview. She comes in looking so hot because she just is. She's super cute. I love her so much. And she goes, guess what? And Chandler says, the 5th dentist caved and now they're all recommending Trident. Another excellent Chandler line. There's just so many in this episode. And then they all kind of go on to say, the guys are kind of like, oh yeah, we don't have to play this game if you don't want. We can play Pictionary instead. And then they all kind of like dunk down under the table. And I just like that they like clearly had planned this speech. Like they clearly had planned a way to like annoy Monica. Like they put their heads together.
And then Rachel's like, no, I can shuffle. And she just shuffles like a boss.
It's totally a trick deck. You don't shuffle like that. You don't shuffle like you pull the cards apart. She didn't even shuffle them. She just like pulled the cards apart.
But she's showing off that she can do a cool thing with the cards. Also, I love Joey's face when he sees that.
Yeah,
he's like,
great.
What?
Yeah.
A little scared in his eyes.
I'm upset that they don't kick their asses after that. Like, I feel like...
Well, yeah. I think it's also realistic when you're like learning. And so, yeah, the game ends, like cuts to the end of the game and they've all lost again. And I love the contrast here where like, Ross is being a bit of a competitive jerk again. And then Rachel is sort of like, makes that statement about like,
ooh, I'm a man. I have to win money to exert my power over women. So good. It's such a great line.
Which is such a great line. And then Monica steps in and basically just like blows what she says out of the water and just is like, we're going to destroy you and make you cry. And I just think that that's really funny because it's just, true.
It's true.
I don't know. It just feels like an accurate depiction of like, feminism where it's like, you have like half of us like half of humans are kind of like, let's point out this issue. And then the other half are like, must dominate. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's not like half as in like the actual population. It's like the actual feelings inside of you.
Right.
Like I know that I can get competitive, especially with men for just the reason of being like, well, I want to fucking screw you over so that I can prove that, people who aren't cis men can lose or win. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that for sure. It is this like feeling, it's this back and forth between like, I want to get to your level, but also these levels shouldn't exist to begin with. It's kind of like, yeah, for sure. Or I want to beat you down from your level, but it's like, no, wait, we should actually remove that, the
level. Yeah. And it's interesting because it's sort of like we've created this dimension that unless you can be that like white, cis, straight, heteronormative male, like unless you can be that, you don't, your word and your input doesn't really have that much merit, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of like that attempt to embody it as much as possible, and then from that position be like, oh well, I got here and it's not that great, and these are the issues, as though like you have to be it to be able to criticize it and to be taken seriously within your criticism. But in actuality, we can criticize it without being it.
Yeah. Yeah, which is why everyone loves to listen to men talk about feminism, but no one wants to listen to women talk about feminism. Or everyone wants like thin women to talk about body positivity, but don't want fat people to talk about body positivity. Anyways, it's just whatever. Life sucks. It's fine. Okay. So now we get to like the final poker scene. This is like the culmination of all the episodes. What?
Wait, I need to just point out one more time that there is another completely deleted scene where they have another lesson from Aunt Iris.
Yeah.
It's short, but yeah, it's there. But I just think it's so cute that they continue getting lessons from her.
Yeah, it's true. You don't just see her for this one-time thing. Okay, so they're back in Monica's apartment, or Monica and Rachel's apartment. I always call it Monica's apartment. And they're playing this, like, this is the culmination, the end of all the poker. Or not like, I'm sure maybe they're going to play poker again. We literally, in all 10 seasons of Friends, never see them play poker again. Spoiler alert. Rachel, again, has a great outfit. Monica is being really intense.
Do you want to go to the bathroom or do you want to play poker?
I'm going to go to the bathroom. And then for some reason, Joey feels like he can't order pizza because Rachel's waiting for a call, which if he just like walked 10 feet over to his apartment next door, he could order pizza, but clearly he didn't take this into account.
Weird.
And then we start to get this like ramp up of energy between Ross and Rachel. Like they're starting to get into it. They're like, they're pushing in.
I feel like it has been so far, but I think that, I agree with you. And I find it interesting because in rewatching this for the podcast and like paying particular attention, I feel like I sort of get it now. Like in the past, I've always been like, I don't particularly understand why Ross was made to be with Rachel. And, you know, like, but like in this scene, like there is chemistry between like the characters and there is a certain like they're on the same level, you know, like Phoebe's on her own level. She's always on her own level. Joey's always on his own level. Probably they're on the same plane or same level somewhere. But then, you know, Monica's on her like super intense, you know, like level, and Chandler's on his own level. But it just sort of, it does feel like Ross and Rachel are existing on the same level. They're connecting there, you know?
Yeah.
It's just interesting. You see it in this episode.
Yeah. And I also want to say that there's a great punny line, and whoever wrote this line, I wish I could give money to. Well, actually, no, they have enough money, but it's just such a great line. It's so punny, and I find you don't really catch it right away. But he says, "You better hop out of the shower because I got a flush." Or I got a flush. So it's like, it's so good. It's such a good line. It's like,
but I don't think this is a Friends line. I think this is a poker thing that people say.
No, that's upsetting.
I could be wrong.
It's a great line. Better hop out of the shower because I got a flush. So good.
Well, hop back in because I got 4 6s.
I got 4 6s. So good.
It's a great comeback from Rachel. So things are heating up more and more, and then Rachel gets the call that she does not get the job. And it sounds like this person is like super rude too, because they hang up on her, which is just like insult to injury, you know?
Yeah.
And everyone's very sympathetic, but it's just like revved her into like a whole new level of being competitive, being in there, like needing this game to just needing it.
It becomes this moment where she's just like, she needs to prove that she can be in control of something, I think.
Yeah, that she has the power, she has the ability to like be in charge of her own destiny and
capable of something and get shit done, sort of thing. Yeah, for sure. And I feel like we've all felt that before, you know, not to speak for everyone, but that feeling where you're just like, I need something to like, I need to prove that I can do this freaking thing, you know, even if it's irrelevant to everyone else, even if it's even irrelevant to me, I just need to do this, you know?
So she gets edgy AF.
Yeah.
And And then people pull out. And I love how everyone's just like, eee!
Yeah.
And she basically threatens Ross. Not really, but like pushes him so that he stays in. Mm-hmm. And again, things are heating up. And the reason why this episode in so many ways is so good is because of like the climax here. Like how they slowly pull in the intensity. And the way that like Jennifer Aniston and David Schwimmer play out the scene is so good. The little like facial expressions and like it's good. It's good stuff. Yeah. You're in there with it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
Do you want to know the pot?
The pot. Oh, yeah, sure.
So, okay, actually, can you take out your calculator? You're going to calculate and I'm going to tell you what happens.
Okay.
Okay. So, I was super curious to figure out like how much money is won at the end of this episode because it sounds like a lot. And I actually couldn't even find it on Fandom. They didn't have the number down. And so, so Rachel calls it, and then Monica says she is in, but doesn't put in a chip. Joey as well. And then Ross bets 50. And then...
But there's an ante too. We don't know what the ante is.
Okay, we don't know the ante. And then, so Ross puts in 50 cents. Chandler puts in 50 cents. Phoebe puts in 50 cents. And then Rachel puts in 50 cents. And then raises it $5. And everyone's like, ee, and scatter. And then Ross stays in. And so he then sees her $5 and raises it $2. And then she sees his $2, so puts in a 2, and then raises it 20. And then he matches her 20. And he gets a little feisty here, and he raises it 25. She sees the 25, and this is when she is like, Monica, get my purse. And there's nothing in it. And I love this demonstration of their relationship. She's like, then get me your purse. Which I just feel like that's something that we would do, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And so she then raises it 17 between Monica's 7 and Phoebe's 10. And then Ross, again, great puns. I'm a little shy. Joey is like, it's okay, Ross, you can ask. And, between Chandler and Joey also matches the 17. And then they're done. So what's the pot?
140 without the ante.
Without the ante. So there's $140 on the table, which... if we consider how many times we've looked back and been like, how much is that difference between, 1995 and now? Like what?
Probably about $200 US. I'm looking it up now. 240. It's equal to 240.
Okay, and then what's $240 into Canadian?
$317.
$317 sitting on the table. I could do with $317 right now. That'd really help me out.
Oh my God, everyone could.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so then we get to the end of that scene and then, Rachel won, but did she really win? That's like kind of the big question. But I think it's very obvious that she didn't actually win and that Ross let her win. And I don't know. Do you feel like it's like, I don't know. I'm glad
we asked in our polls, do you think Ross let Rachel win? And 83% said yes and 17% said no. Mm-hmm. I mean, I kind of feel like it's pretty scripted to show that he let her win because of the way he fights for them to not look at the cards. But I think another interesting question that we asked the polls is, if you were in Ross's position, would you have let Rachel win? What would you answer to that?
I think that if I was like in love with Rachel in that same way, I probably would have. But it's also could be perceived as like condescending to do that. So like I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, like if she ever found out that she didn't actually win, that would be pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's hard because it's like a split-second decision that you have to make. And there's a large part of me also that's sort of like, this is a nice representation of disparity, the wealth gap, et cetera, of like her working a waitressing job and him having a really nice fancy job where he's able to live by himself and have a monkey instead of a roommate in New York. And so, Ross, you can give Rachel $300. That's fine.
Agreed.
I think she gives you enough free coffee in the cafe.
Yeah, and then he says that line, look how happy she is. So clearly he was just really stoked to make Rachel happy. And yeah, he definitely loves her, and we'll explore that further as the show unfolds. But the ways in which his love is not always the greatest is definitely something that comes up a lot. Then we move to the final scene with obviously it's Bye Bye Birdie, and I don't even know what show this unbearable something of being. Unbearable lightness of being.
It's being as well. It's not even a bean.
Yeah, I know.
But it's a hilarious closing scene, and they're really like setting it up for like, I love the way that everyone like ducks away from Monica when she picks up her wine glass, her really bulbous, obnoxious wine glass. But it's interesting because in season 10, they actually talk about when Monica broke a plate playing Pictionary, which is a reference back to this episode because they hide the plate from her in this episode.
No, it's in this episode that they talk about how she broke a plate in Pictionary.
Yeah, and they do again in season 10.
Oh, wow, cool. I didn't know that.
Anyway, so we'll see a lot more of Monica's
competitiveness, yeah.
And destructive competitiveness.
I really miss game nights with friends, and it makes me sad to see other people playing game nights and me not being able to play a game night because COVID.
I know.
Yeah.
Same.
All right, well, that's it. That's our episode for this week.
So everything's back on track as per usual. We'll have some more polls and Netflix watch parties coming Monday, which is when you listen to this. If you listen to it on our release day on Sunday, then it's the next day.
Be sure to check us out on our Instagram at WT Phalange Podcast. And if you can spare $2, head over to our Patreon page and become a Patreon subscriber. If you can spare $5, even greater. Maybe not greater. Just whatever. Spare whatever you can. And if you can't spare any money right now because we're all strapped for cash in this pandemic, please, please, please head over to our iTunes and give us an awesome 5-star review. Or maybe like, don't give us a 2-star review. You can give us an honest review though, but not a 2-star review. All right. You can find me. My name is Emilie, and you can find me on my Instagram at EmilieBYoga or on my website, www.emiliebyoga.com. And that's Emilie with an I-E, not a Y.
And you can find me, Quinn, at Kanien'kehá on Instagram or quinnkbrunet.com. And don't forget, please feel free to always message us, send us your feedback, your input, and let us all know how you're doing as listeners.
Woo woo!
So keep deconstructing and diversifying the media you consume.